Welcome back to Adventures in Bread Making with Doug. I thought I'd take just a minute to review some of the essentials that you might want to have when you're starting out in bread making, most of which you would have around the house, around the kitchen anyway. One critical thing is to have a digital scale. You really should be measuring by weight in these recipes because it really makes a big difference. One that you can tear out, meaning to zero down. You want to be able to measure in grams, have something that has a certain amount of precision. There are lots of them out there in the marketplace. Then other things that are obviously helpful, measuring spoons, teaspoons and whatnot, tablespoons. You want to make sure that it goes down to maybe about 1/8 of a teaspoon, because sometimes some of these elements are just small amounts. When you're working the dough, obviously having some surface that works for you, either the flip side of a cutting board that you've got, or on your regular counter. A bench knife will help when you need to be scraping and cutting the dough. Thermometers, a digital thermometer. If you're checking the temperature of things such as water that you're adding in, or checking the temperature of the dough when you want to get started, or when your finished loaf, you want to be sometimes 190 to 200 is the recommended doneness for some of these, so you want to make sure you have those to check the temperature. For mixing, and get yourself some different sizes of mixing bowls. For storing your flour, I like the Cambro tubs. You can keep it obviously in your flour bag, but I like the tubs because I know I've got keeping moisture out, any little critters out. I also use the Cambro. This is recommended by Forkish in his book. I use these Cambro tubs because they do give you a lot of room. Most of his recipes are a 2-loaf recipe, so you can, within this 12-quart tub, mix and fold and blend all of what you need. Let it rise. You can see on the outside where you are in terms of your dough rise. Again, I use these little page markers a lot to kind of mark where the dough started and where it was going to. So, and then further on, you're going to need, and you can probably just use mixing bowls and things that you have, but it's helpful to have some proofing bowls. These are 9-inch cane proofing bowls. You end up putting a lot of flour tucked into those to allow your second rise, your proof rise for your dough. They also most come with a linen liner, so sometimes you can do it with the linen liner or go back to just the cane. It also gives you a nice pattern on your sourdough breads when you flip them out. In terms of some of the ingredients you use, I really do enjoy the flours from King Arthur. The quality is very good. They have a lot of information about how they source it, and I have a lot of confidence in their stuff. This is their all-purpose, unbleached. I use their bread flour too. Harder to find is rye flour. That's helpful sometimes with some of your loaves. You're not using as much of it. Of course, whole wheat flour, again, from King Arthur. One of the things I have been adding to some of my sourdoughs are flax seeds. They have some that are ground too, although as I understand you can use a coffee grinder to grind them down if you wanted, but I'll put flax seeds in some of my breads. That gives it a nice earthy flavor. As you can see, we have some of our dough rising in one of these Cambro tubs. I like those because you can really see what's going on. You can cover it, and you know you're in good shape. And then, of course, for reference materials, Ken Forkish's book, which you see I've taken the cover off of because it just gets in the way. Flour, water, salt, yeast. This really, if you are just starting out, it's kind of the Bible of bread making, his style. He tends to have things a little darker loaves than I bake at times, but a lot of good information in there and good recipes. And you can branch out from there. But these are kind of some of the basics that you're going to need to get you through the first couple of loaves that you try. Some of the things we have been talking about as essential items include the vessel in which you're going to bake your bread. For me, that is an enameled Dutch oven and cast iron. The size that works for me is doesn't mark on here, but this was a 3-quart and a 4-quart that work very well. One thing about these is you need to be sure they're rated for about 500 degrees. Usually the thing that's not rated for that heat is the knob. So you might want to double check that. If for any reason the knob is some sort of plastic, you may have to get a metal drawer pull or something to replace that. But for the most part, the thing that doesn't rate up to 500 degrees is the knob on the lid. Besides having the Dutch oven, which is absolutely essential to keeping the steam and building a great crust and getting a good oven rise, we've got some other pans we've been trying in the family. This is for an Italian loaf, but it could also be used for baguettes. It's a little wider than your normal baguette, but it holds the shape of the Italian loaf very nicely and dimples the bottom. We've had good success baking with that. We also have been a little crazy with a burger pan. These make good hamburger size buns, and most of the recipes seem to be geared toward about this volume, coming up with 6 hamburger buns. The other baking pan that some in the family have been trying is called a Pullman pan for making a pan de mie or a Pullman loaf. This has a sliding cover on it. You may wonder, well, what's so special about this? The nice thing about this is you get a nice rectangular loaf that allows you to have typical sandwich slices. You should look up the history of the Pullman pan. It was created by the railroad company Pullman because they felt like it would be a more efficient way of baking and storing loaves of bread in the train cars, in their dining cars. So interesting history on that one. And we'll be trying a pan de mie or a Pullman loaf a little later on. And then if I didn't mention it earlier, having some of these plastic tubs is very helpful. I use some of them for flour storage, but these clear ones are also very helpful when you're trying to watch the rise and doubling on your bread. This one happens to be a 6-quart, good for like a single loaf, or maybe if you were doing something with a larger amount of starter. Then the 12-quart is what I use generally for the 2-loaf recipes, and you can just mix and stir and fold all in the same pan.